In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a police chief named Duane Fisher of the Manheim Township Police Department made headlines this past week after video surfaced of him off duty in plain clothes and driving an unmarked police car, drawing his weapon on a motorcyclist in the back alley of a business. No lights, no sirens, no uniform, just a guy with a gun ordering another guy off of his motorcycle, and it looked more like a carjacking than a traffic stop, and yet the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office declined to press charges, claiming there was no criminal intent. Let's talk about it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. Now, first things first, I noticed as I was recording my response to this video, the illustrious John Bryan from the Civil Rights Lawyer has already beaten me to a fantastic analysis on this video. So I have to admit that I really didn't know what to do. I still wanted to say what I wanted to say about this video, but instead of going ahead and editing it and trying to get it out to where it can compete with John's video, I did the petty thing and I just clicked on his video at least 40,000 times and then clicked back off before it hit 30 seconds so he wouldn't get credit for the view. So that's what I do for you, John. I'm just joking. I love John's breakdown. He already said most of everything that needed to be said, but I have a couple other points, so let's get into it. The first thing I want to say is that we have to address the elephant in the room in this case. And that is that if you or I had done what Chief Duane Fisher did, we would have been arrested and charged with aggravated assault. In fact, we probably would have been shot and killed and died in a cold alley. But when a rogue cop does it, while acting well outside the bounds of his lawful authority, we're told that we have to look the other way. There's nothing to see here. Why? Because he wore a badge. Not at the time, mind you, but in life at some point. Now, the only way that they'll try to spin it is if the community asks them tough questions, and the only way he'll be held accountable is if that same community refuses to accept the bullshit answers that come in response to the tough questions. Don't be fooled. This case is not about bad judgment, unless, of course, we're talking about the very weak district attorney, Heather Adams, who is certainly doing her part to make sure there's no accountability. But not to worry, we'll talk about her shortly. This case is about a deliberate abuse of authority, probably stemming from, as John aptly put it, a road rage incident gone bad. It's about the filing of a false police report and a warrant affidavit in order to cover the chief's tracks. And it's about the acquiescence of a weak prosecuting attorney uniquely positioned to do the right thing, but choosing to bury her head in the sand and do nothing. Now, before we get too far afield, let's talk about what the official narrative was from the lying chief, Duane Fisher. So we'll take a look at the surveillance video here, and we'll talk about what the claims were. Chief Fisher claimed that he witnessed the rider going along with no registration plate, a heinous offense, not to be doubted. But in addition to that, he claimed that the rider was weaving in and out of traffic and doing all sorts of dangerous things and refused to stop when Fisher attempted to pull him over. But when we look at the video here, we see none of that. Okay, so it's weird. We're 10 seconds in. There's no officer even here. They're not attempting to pull him over. There's no traffic stop happening. He is casually moving his bike back and forth in order to get it situated perfectly, because it turns out he works inside this business and he's just driving to work. He's not ditching the bike. He's not running inside like he just got away from a hot pursuit. In fact, he'll later tell the news that the guy he saw, who later turned out to be the police officer, was waving at him at the traffic light. So we're 14 seconds in here before Fisher pulls up. Note again, no lights on. Clearly no sirens because our guy is looking down. Fisher is visibly excited as he's unbuckling the seatbelt and jumping out and drawing his gun. He's there a full 8 seconds before the rider ever looks back. So that's evidence enough that there was no sirens. He must have been looking back in response to Fisher yelling at him. But when he looks back, all he sees is a guy in plain clothes pointing a gun at him and yelling at him. It doesn't look like a traffic stop. It looks like a carjacking or a kidnapping. Now, keep in mind how all of this played out. Fisher found this guy's traffic infractions to be so serious that they justified drawing a firearm. He escalated it immediately into a deadly force felony-style takedown, but he didn't call it in until after he had unsuccessfully tried to arrest the biker. The biker actually got away from him. So are we really to be expected to be so naive that we believe that this was anything more than a road raging off duty cop who, like so many others like him, let his ego get him into a situation that he had to lie his way out of? Because I don't think anybody should be expected to believe that. That's what it looks like to me. And I suspect that that's what it looks like to you. What I think is that Fisher intentionally kept his lights off because he had no interest in having this encounter documented on video. And only when it became apparent that he wasn't going to win this encounter did he call it in, and he wasn't worried about the narrative that he drafted because he knew there was no video. And only when it became apparent that there was independent video that showed that the thing that happened in real life isn't what happened in his made-up BS story, that's when we got to see what a cover-up looks like in Manheim Township. And we know that it was a cover-up because the video surveillance that we just went through completely contradicts Fisher's version of events. The charges were dropped, but they weren't dropped because it was the right thing to do. So don't be fooled by that. Dropping the charges was not an attempt to remedy a wrong or to seek justice. If you peel back a layer or two, you can see it for what it really is, and that is damage control. The reality is that the only thing separating a law-abiding officer from a criminal is a very thin veneer of lawful privilege afforded by the badge or the official capacity. Without the lawful duties accompanying Fisher's official capacity, we're left with a civilian using force without justification, and that's a crime, which leads me to this weak-ass district attorney, Heather Adams. Now, there's a lot wrong with this situation, but let's not lose sight of what's really important. Adams comes out with some BS about how they're not investigating the use of force because their office doesn't really do that. And since it doesn't rise to the level of criminal intent, she's not going to do anything that would warrant charges for Chief Fisher. She even went on to say that Chief Fisher called out on the radio that he was following a motorcycle with no registration plate and he provided his location. He then advised that the driver was operating the motorcycle erratically and that he ran a red light. He further indicated that the driver was passing vehicles on the right, mounting the sidewalk, using no turn signals, and cutting across multiple lanes of traffic and weaving between other vehicles. And after Chief Fisher relocated the motorcycle, he then again radioed his location, noting that he had the vehicle stopped to the rear of 1917 Fruitvale Pike. Chief Fisher then exited his vehicle with his weapon drawn and physically grabbed the driver as he began to start the motorcycle. Here's the problem. There's no evidence on the video that he tried to stop the bike. He was running the bike and trying to park it. The video proves that Fisher was not attempting to make a lawful traffic stop and that he lied about the circumstances. Whether he was calling it out on the radio makes no difference whatsoever. He has no explanation for why he chose to approach the driver gun drawn, felony traffic stop style without using lights or siren. You don't get to a felony unless you have an evasion, and you don't have a legal evasion where the person has no notice that they are being stopped by a police officer. So you can't escalate a traffic infraction to deadly force without even attempting a traffic stop and still be abiding within the confines of the law. The law requires that a person be put on notice that they're being stopped by a law enforcement officer. That didn't happen here, and the video makes it obvious. But let's go even deeper. Pennsylvania is, in fact, a stand-your-ground state. It's a state that allows lawful open carry. My kid rides a motorcycle and always carries a gun. You approach him with your gun drawn, with no lights or siren, in plain clothes, in a vehicle that's not obviously a police car and it's unmarked, you're probably going to take 2 to 3 rounds to the boiler room. And had Mr. Rivera been carrying a firearm and had shot Fisher in self-defense, believing he was being attacked by an armed stranger, one, he would have been completely legally justified, but that would not have mattered. The state would have thrown him under the jail. We wouldn't be discussing what was really going on here. They'd be trying him for murder one and asking for the death penalty. And it would all be because of a power-tripping, ego-driven liar who decided to use his badge and influence to mess with a guy who had no reason to know that he wasn't being carjacked. And Fisher would have been on his way to thin blue line martyrdom, hailed as a fallen hero. That's really the brutal hypocrisy of this officer safety doctrine. Do you know how stupid and unsafe this was from an officer safety perspective. To jump out on a guy who doesn't know you're a cop with your gun in his face over a traffic infraction in a stand your ground state that allows open carry, you're asking to be shot. Officer safety is like the security blanket that Linus carries around. They use the words to excuse their behavior, while their conduct is completely contradictory to the sound principles of officer safety. It literally makes as much sense as Linus carrying a blanket in the summertime. No, it is not about officer safety. It's about immunity. He pulled that gun for a reason that cannot be explained away as anything other than criminal intent. The very definition of assault is to do a thing that creates an apprehension in a person that they will suffer physical contact of an injurious, threatening, or insulting nature. And you don't point a gun at someone unless you want them to so apprehend being shot that they instantly become willing to submit to your authority. And as a police officer, when you operate outside the privilege carried by your official capacity, all that is left is criminal intent. Furthermore, you can't unintentionally write a police report and file a criminal affidavit for a warrant with misleading information. Those acts alone exhibit the criminal intent. And the only way that you can't see it is to intentionally choose to ignore it. Maybe District Attorney Heather Adams needs to revisit the lesson she apparently skipped on mens rea in law school. No, Chief Duane Fisher used the power of his badge without regard for the responsibilities of his office. And the idea that he lacked criminal intent is laughable without being the least bit funny. In closing, the real crime here is the protection of this road-raging, rogue chief of police by the district attorney. This was the same point I was making about the sheriff in Oklahoma that we covered last week, demanding special treatment because he was a cop. It seems like a minor thing on a traffic stop. But when the highest ranking officer in the department, the one who makes policy decisions, is doing this stuff, how can you expect anything different or better from the rank and file of the men and women who work for him? And the language issued by the DA about the way this case was resolved is very telling. She said that the police department agreed with them dropping the charges. Well, read the tea leaves, friends. That means that they didn't drop the charges because they looked at it and they were like, wait a minute, this doesn't match. They didn't do it because it was the right thing to do. And they didn't do it and go correct the police department. They did it as part of a plea negotiation. He pled to a bunch of traffic offenses. And then they went back and got the approval of the department and let it be known in the statement that the department agreed. And they did it all right under our noses and told us to deal with it. That's the truth. Police departments routinely insert themselves into plea negotiations to control the narrative. And they're treated by the prosecutor's office as if they're victims. And I realize that in this particular case, Mr. Rivera was actually charged with assault of this police officer, and victim is something that Chief Fisher certainly claimed, although the video evidence contradicted that. But in most cases where you don't have a police officer that was individually actually harmed in a case, they're not the victims. They're simply a witness for the state. They're no different than a person standing on the side of the road videoing. That person would also be a witness for the state. They just happen to be a witness for the state who has the power to arrest you. But they're not victims, and they shouldn't have a say. They're witnesses. And in cases like this, they're perpetrators with institutional power. Neither Chief Fisher nor the DA may have fired a shot in this case, but they fired a warning to the public, to the legal system, and to every cop watching. You can get away with this. That's the real threat to safety, and that's why silence is not an option in this situation. Public pressure seems to be the only thing that makes a difference to these people and in these situations. So press on. Anyway, that's all for this one, guys. I just wanted to put it on your radar. I know you've probably seen the video, but I wanted to do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis on it and just kind of give you my thoughts on what I think this actually says about law enforcement leadership and the relationship that police departments and their leaders have with the local district attorney, and how the wrong approach to that relationship can lead to galvanizing very bad behavior on the part of the police. I'd like to invite you over to the Substack community. It's a place where we talk about more than what we do on the actual video. Maybe we get into some topics underpinning the comments or some of the things that are said, but it's an opportunity for you to engage with me. I've pulled back from the comments because I can't keep up with responding to all of them. So if you want to engage with me, head over to the Substack. It's absolutely free to join. If you want to join on a paid tier, that's something you can do, but it's only for people who want to support the Southern Draw Law channel monetarily. If you don't like blogs and you don't like reading, or maybe you just don't want to follow me to a separate platform, but you'd like to support the channel monetarily, I'll put my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.